gorgeous sounds of Donnie Fraunhofer. Our thanks to Donnie for the tunes, as always, here on Tim Graham and Friends, brought to you by CTBK, CPAs and Business Consultants. I am Tim Graham of The Athletic, here with Jonah Bronstein of the Bronstein Concern and Matthew Fairburn, also of The Athletic. Full show today. We have some Sabres talk with Kris Baker coming up a little bit later. We're also going to have Joel Staniszewski on the line from Vegas as usual, and what's becoming a regular guest for us here on Tim Graham and Friends is Gerald Dixon, former Bills scout who has been generous with his time and seems to enjoy being one of the Fs on Tim Graham and Friends. Nice to have him back. So we'll get into Bills Seahawks breakdown with Gerald. And, of course, you're going to get that with Joel Staniszewski, too, from a betting standpoint. Guys, we're starting to warm up a little bit with sports after a cool down, post-World Series, post-NBA Finals, post-Stanley Cup. College football, at least in Western New York, is now back with Mid-American Conference play. UB gets off to a slow start, but an emphatic win in DeKalb, Illinois, over Northern Illinois earlier this week. I don't know. Before we get into that, anything else anybody else want to talk about here? I don't know. Do we want to talk politics? I don't know that we need to. I know it's got to be on everybody's mind, so maybe we'll just leave this a political-free zone.
Yeah, I don't think
we'll just give people a diversion. We'll say this is politics-free, with the exception of asking Joel Staniszewski what's happening in Nevada, because regardless of your interest in the presidential race, whatever Nevada's up to out there with its counting, we'll see if Joel has any insight on that.
Counting is tough, Tim.
And Cheektowaga.
It can be. It can be. One of my favorite things about following coverage of the presidential ballots, watching journalists do math on the spot on national television. I'm sure they're piddling their pants a little bit. I know I would be. I'd say, all right, well, now we're going out to Maricopa County. Tim Graham has the latest. And I'll say, all right, guys, Biden has 21,403 more votes, and Donald Trump has 19,412 more votes. And Tim, what's that? How does that? I was like, I just gave you the numbers, guys. You got people back there.
Plug them in.
Yeah, punch it. You guys got calculators and stuff. I'm looking into a camera and holding the microphone.
That's why you need guys that are both accountants and journalists. Isn't that right, Tim?
Yes, that's right. I'll be an expert at subtracting from 20 minutes from my days of covering hockey. I can subtract anything from 20 minutes to tell you at what point a goal was scored or a penalty was taken. Beyond that, I have trouble. I can do an ERA. I can multiply by 9 and divide by innings pitched.
But you can't calculate passer rating.
No, that's you need a calculator for that. I have a special program, website that I have to go to for passer rating.
You know, one thing I find funny on Election Day every year, sports reporters, especially television sports reporters, get very sanctimonious about this is like a sports night every night where we work late, we have things going on, changing at the last minute. We could do 365 election nights if we wanted to. I'm wondering now, looking at that and going through the night, being 3 days, this kind of nonstop 72-hour coverage that we've gotten, all information coming in from all different parts of the country. How many sports reporters really think that they've been around this block before and can do this with their eyes closed like they like to tweet about every election afternoon?
We are wired to file on deadline. That's about those are our chops, I think, when it comes to this. We have the ability to, I think, block things out, not panic, file when you have editors breathing down your neck at 10:30 and you know people are waiting on you. But, yeah, beyond that, when every little fact could be wrong, you don't have somebody handing you transcripts. All the stats aren't being just given to you. You don't have to do your own math. You don't have to find your own context. You don't have to fish out really to any significant degree whether or not Sean McDermott is lying to you, or whether you're being withheld, information's being withheld, or who is, filing a lawsuit. It's somebody from a different game is all of a sudden going to come in and start affecting your game. Hey, Tim, I know you just covered Bills Seahawks, but the Steelers just filed a lawsuit against Josh Allen. I think something about the field goal shouldn't count. Okay, a little different.
Well, somebody compared it to covering a game like a basketball game, but you're getting all the baskets reported to you out of order. So you don't know what the final score is, and you're getting all these layups and dunks and misses and anything. You can really apply that to any sport. And then not until you have them all and you can piece them together do you have any idea what the final score is. And that would be a very stressful game to try to write if all of the sports information came jumbled and then you had to assemble it on deadline.
Great point.
Well, there's also the fact that it really matters. Right?
That too.
That's what I find obnoxious about the whole thing of the whole, why are these guys getting pizza? Sports writers do this every night. I'm like, yeah, you also probably slept till 11 and like you're watching a ball game that doesn't matter. And, these people are covering something of significance. Now, I will say, sort of in the same vein, there's probably a bit of an issue, and I'm not an expert in this. It's not necessarily my I don't have experience covering elections, but I think there might be a problem in this country of the way elections become sports. They become this thing, like you're saying, Jonah, right? We're getting the information. The votes are in, right? The votes are in. Like, nobody's taking a lead or, coming back in a state. The votes are all there. They're just being counted at different times. So, like, the way it's covered as such a sport, I think, becomes probably a little bit unhealthy for the consumers of the information. Certainly, like Jonah was saying before we hit record, those of us who have been basically watching it for 72 straight hours, you can't turn away because of the way it's covered as this, like a sport, basically.
It's covered like a sport so much that it's become many people's favorite sport. Ratings are down across the board for almost every sport, and the main reason that people suspect is because everybody's watching this political coverage more and more and more.
And you can bet on this now, which we'll talk to Joel Staniszewski about too. If you get into a position where you can now bet on these races, maybe we'll start to see a push for more races. Let's break up all the different. Let's do an NFL style where we're not just waiting until Sunday. Let's have some Tuesday, some Thursday. Let's get some in the fall, some in the summer. We need some stuff to bet on here.
Fantasy Congress draft.
Yes.
Well, and it makes it so people are they treat their respective side and their respective candidate like their favorite team. You see more signs and flags of political candidates than you do for the Bills around here at times. It's like, and people, there's a tribalism aspect to it of like, this is your team, this is the opponent, and you're as passionate about it as you are if they were the New England Patriots playing your Buffalo Bills.
Matt, you mentioned how we consume these elections, and I don't think it would be the case for every election. Obviously, for presidential elections, though, we're lucky being at The Athletic. They gave us the day off. Of course, if there had been breaking news on our beats, we're expected to cover them, and we covered our teams, but we were given the day off to vote and all. And that's an aside, really. But it's almost, I think we need to get to an expectation with as important as it is. And I've thought this for many years, is that there's always been a flippancy to the presidential election night. And for instance, we have, election night in America, I believe is what CNN calls its program. Well, it's still election night in America has not stopped. It was election night in America at 9:30 this morning on a Friday. Should it be election week in America? As important as this is, and with everybody talking about, the fraudulence and how come we don't know and where these votes, can we just at least get to a point where maybe not the way it was for most elections. Some elections did take a long time, but if we can just set an expectation of a lot of votes were cast, and it's going to take a while to get through this. So can we just, all right, you voted on Tuesday, get back to us on Thursday, and we'll update you as we go. But you don't need your result 3 hours after the polls close, because that's what your brain is used to. My team kicked off at 1 o'clock. By 4 o'clock, I'm going to know who won, and I'm on to my dinner and maybe relaxing for the 4 o'clock games.
Well, yeah, I think even in this run up to this, there was even more expectation of that because of, the mail-in voting and different things like that. Everybody said, we're going to need some patience, right? And I read all that stuff. I heard all that stuff from various media outlets. And then still there I was on Tuesday night. Like, it was the big game, so I don't think anybody really heeded that advice. And we're all sitting there on Tuesday. Like, at one point, I think it was like, I don't know, probably close to midnight when I went to bed, but it was like, I probably told myself 4 or 5 times before that, like, they're not going to figure this out tonight. Why am I sitting up here waiting? But I think we're all kind of conditioned to think Tuesday night, that's the big night. It's the big game. It's like the Super Bowl.
They would tease you, though, and good television. And it was also good news. They weren't doing it sensationalistically, I don't think, but they would say, we're expecting more ballots to come in Maricopa County within the next half hour. So it's like, well, shit, I can stay up another half hour and just to see, and then it would be 400 votes and be like, I stayed up for that. But yeah, it's there was there was a play, there was a score. It was the Red Zone channel, right? It was a team.
You got the big
teams
board
inside the 20. Yeah, Biden or Trump are inside the 20. One of them's about to score here. Let's take a look. Let's hang on and see what happens. My hope, though, is that with so many people who voted in this election, that it exposed that many more people to, okay, this shouldn't be foreign to you anymore. If they're, we talked about how pitiful voting percentage was, turnout has been in our country for decades, if not centuries. And that I think people who don't vote aren't used to all these machinations and like how it's supposed to go. They just want the sudden reward or the payoff. And now that everybody was emotionally invested in this, regardless of what side you were on, I mean, the numbers are just through the roof. I think that's great for the country that we're not, maybe now then the expectations will shift for 2 years from now with Senate election, the midterms, and then another 4 years for, anyways. So I said we weren't going to do political talk. We didn't pick a side, but we were just doing observations there about what this week has been like.
It's been a lot.
Jonah, how are you handling it?
Well, I mean, I'm not sleeping much, just staying up all night because you kind of think this is when they're going to dump that last pile of votes and tell us who won what states and whether it's over or not. And you don't want to be, not staring at your television when they tell you who's going to be the next president. But other than that, I found it interesting, captivating to watch and learn how these things come together and all these different processes. And, we're used to hearing on election night, sometimes early in election night, who won. But maybe for a little bit of perspective, you think the first 100 years or so of this country, people didn't know who won the election for days, even weeks after it happened because of the way word traveled and things like that. So the system is set up to elect a president and have a president inaugurated 2.5 months later. And this time is used to count the votes, certify the votes, and do everything that leads to the inauguration of our next president, whoever it is, in January.
Yeah, it's educational. And I think that, we're all, the three of us went to college, and I'm sure we had, our social studies classes in high school covered this, and whatever we did in college. I've learned a lot just watching this. I know what the Electoral College is. I know that 270 is the magic number, but when you get immersed in it like this, I feel like a smarter American through this process. So, I mean, that's just my high-handed, philosophical view of it. But being plugged in and invested in the future of the country this is grown up stuff. It's the stuff I used to probably roll my eyes at my parents about. It's like, what's the big deal? My daughter, who is 12, has been sitting now. Part of it's because of she has an assignment that she has to do in her social studies class, but she's actually into it. Like she's down there with me watching, and she's got to mark off the states and which one means what a battleground state is. Just because it's undecided doesn't necessarily make it a battleground state. For instance, Alaska, and having these discussions with her has been pretty fun. I don't think I would have been even remotely interested in having a discussion about that with my parents when I was 12. But
yeah, it's bizarre too. Regardless of what side you're on, it, like you said, you're conditioned to be like, I'm sitting down in front of my TV for 3 hours and I'm going to find out if this football team won. And there's that rush and the adrenaline and you're rooting for your team. Now I feel like whenever we find out who wins, it's just going to be like, ah, finally. Like there's not going to be that like celebration necessarily because
right.
It's been dragged out so long.
Or I guess this would be like, could you imagine like getting your buddies together? We'll get some beers and pizza. The Tour de France starts tonight.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, and then trying to keep up that level of commitment and energy until it's over, however many stages later. And it's like, all right, I got to go to work at some point. I got to sleep. I've lost interest. Really.
As I've gotten older, that's kind of how I feel about like some of these overtime hockey games that go to like, 4 or 5 overtimes. I'm like, well, at this point, I value my sleep over finding out who, won this game. And the hockey becomes so exhausted by the end that you're just like, oh, whatever. Like, who cares at this point?
And then at some point, I'm drawing a blank on a hockey ref. Kaharski comes out and says, all right, guys, we're going to stop. We're going to resume this tomorrow at 12. Everybody get out of here.
We'll keep counting tomorrow.
Yeah, we'll get back at it. We're done here for tonight. Kerry Frazier comes out. Okay, that's enough rambling on about that. I mentioned it earlier, UB football, Mid-American Conference. Jonah, I know that you cover them closely. You watch them closely. A lot of people were watching because the game was on national TV. What were your first impressions of seeing Lance Leipold's unit and his team, for that matter, on Tuesday night?
Well,
or was it? I'm sorry, Wednesday night. Wednesday night.
You're talking about the game, not on the Zoom call later.
Yes.
Well, I thought the first that we've seen, the 2020 UB Bulls, looked a lot like the last 8 games of the 2019 UB Bulls. They went with Kyle Van Treese at quarterback, who's the quarterback that finished the season, even though there was a training camp competition to see whether he would start. They won by 19 points, which matches the point differential they had over that 8-game stretch at the end of the season, where they lost 2 of those games, but then they won 6 games by huge amounts, and they really dominated their MAC opponents and their bowl game opponent Charlotte. Now, Northern Illinois, which was the class of the MAC a few years back, or 2 years ago, they beat UB in the championship game. They've gone through a coaching change, have a lot of freshmen. They're not the team that they were. In fact, in one of the polls, they're picked to finish last in the MAC West. So this is a game that UB should have won by a number of points. They made a few mistakes, really in all the phases, offense, defense, special teams, that contributed to Northern Illinois getting to 30 points, when maybe if UB was a little bit sharper, it would have been an even bigger blowout. But then UB scores 3 defensive touchdowns, including 2 on almost consecutive plays, and that doesn't usually happen. So the offense only produced 28 of those points. I think overall it was a good game. UB was without 3 of their starters for undisclosed reasons. Might have had something to do with the COVID positive test that they had right before training camp opened. It probably did, because I think if it didn't, maybe they would tell us why these players didn't play, if it was just an ankle or a hamstring. But overall, they looked very good. Jarrett Patterson set the career rushing touchdown record in only the first game of his junior season. He had another 137 yards. It actually was the first time, the last 6 games of last year, he went over 140 in every game. So 137 was a little bit below what he had been producing, but it was still a big game.
He didn't play much of the. He didn't. Yeah. He came out.
Right. He had two touchdowns on 110 yards in the first half, and then they started running marks and doing some other things in the second half. And so if you take last season and this season, that's 14 games. That's about a college football season if you have a good one and you play in the postseason. He's over 2,100 total yards, 1,950 rushing yards, 23 touchdowns. I mean, you have to look at, as I tweeted, O.J. Simpson in the 70s is the only Buffalo running back that over a 14-game stretch played like that. Thurman Thomas in his MVP years never did that. No UB back, even at Division III or Division I, has produced a 14-game stretch like that. So, we say this all the time when UB's good. You got to go out and watch him.
What about Jehu Colcrick at Clymer High School?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, that's a good one. There probably are some high school, but not even. I mean, they don't play 14 games, so I don't know if you'd ever get quite those numbers. But yeah, you do see high school athletes that are able to rack up 300 yards per game, and that's almost the production you're seeing from Jarrett Patterson, is that he's dominating like you would see in a high school setting where teams are much better than the team they're playing against. Now, UB has a tougher game coming up, their home opener Tuesday against Miami, which is the defending MAC champions and the team that in some of these polls have picked UB to be the favorite in the MAC, and some of the other ones have picked Miami. So this is the big game for really seeing whether UB can win the division, go to the MAC title game. As I mentioned on the show last week, this perfect season is a possibility. I don't know if they'll get all the way there and win every single game, but they have the opportunity to be a team that, if they get off to a strong start, can think about winning all the games on their schedule. But this is really the big game that will determine whether UB has a good season or a great season, I think.
The big game. Matt and I used to get together and cover the big game on a weekly basis.
It's Buffalo, Miami, reviving the rivalry.
That's true. That's the same tribe. A little bit of trivia. The Miami Indians that settled down in that portion of Ohio are the same Miami Indians down there in Florida.
That I didn't know. Now, you're from Ohio. Do you call it Miami of Ohio? Because there's some split whether that.
Yeah,
actually, it's not correct, but a lot of people do it.
You have to, because even in Ohio, I'm guessing even in Dayton and Cincinnati down there in that region, as opposed to Cleveland where I'm from, but you have to call it Miami of Ohio because Miami is just such a big city. I guess unless you're in obvious context of talking about specifically Mid-American Conference sports, but
Miami and the MAC don't want you to do that in sports copy. I think it's in the game notes. Yeah,
tough.
We'll do it anyway.
It's like the Ohio. They want you to call it the Ohio State University. Well, guess what? I'm not gonna. It's Ohio State.
Imagine if it came in the election results and we have the results from Miami, and you think that's going to tell us who wins Florida. I guess they're both swing states, but then I'll say, no, this is Miami of Ohio.
Battleground states. That's
not
right.
Miami-Dade. Maybe we should just call it Miami-Dade from now on, and Miami of Ohio can just be Miami.
The Hurricanes is what we called it when I worked at the Palm Beach Post, because there's just so much Miami involved.
The U.
And everything. Huh?
The U.
The U. They're right. The U, which is also stupid. I mean, I get it.
It's AP style. I don't think so, but
Miami Gardens. Okay. Let's hear from some others. People are sick of hearing from us. Let's hear from people like Kris Baker. You follow him at Sabres Prospects. Let's listen to Gerald Dixon, former Bills scout. Let's listen to Joel Staniszewski. But before we do that, I need to remind you. I need to remind you two guys, and anybody else listening.
Let me get a pen.
Get this down. I want you to jot this down. That Tim Graham and Friends is brought to you by Shampoo, Travis, Besaw, and Kirshner, CPAs, business consultants. CTBK is a leading accounting firm with a growing team of accountants and business consultants with roots in Amherst. CTBK pairs every project with a focus on a human connection between its team and the client. For assurance, accounting, taxes, litigation support, and advice on mergers and acquisitions, CTBK is available and ready to solve any issue your business faces. For a consultation or to request a quote, call 716-630-2400. Again, 716-630-2400. CTBK, over a quarter century of proven accounting and business excellence for Western New York and beyond. All right, who you guys want to hear from first?
Kris Baker.
You want to hear from Gerald Dixon first? Do you want to hear from Kris Baker first, or do you want to hear from Joel Staniszewski?
Kris Baker.
All right.
Baker.
Here he is, Kris Baker. long-awaited return to the program is at Sabres Prospects. That's where you would follow him on Twitter, and that's what he does. He tracks the Sabres prospects. He tracks NHL prospects and does it like nobody else. It is Kris Baker joining Tim Graham and Friends, brought to you by CTBK. Daddy Bakes, good to see you again, man.
Great to see all of your faces here on our Brady Bunch grid, and I think we've all gotten used to the Brady Bunch grid at this point over the last few months, but I feel like the band is back together, man. So it's good to be with you guys.
In spirit. Yeah, it's not our usual preferred gathering, but it'll do for now. And the show has been devoid of hockey talk, and it's because there hasn't been too much. And yes, there was a draft, and the Taylor Hall signing was big for the Buffalo Sabres, but with no games to be played for a couple of months, everybody's just so into the Bills and even UB football, I think, more. But I think it's time. The leaves are falling off the trees. The NBA and Major League Baseball are finally done with their seasons. Now we're kind of getting in that mood again. I think our Western New York internal clocks are starting to crave hockey. So wanted to have you on, Kris. And there has been a lot going on, though. I mean, little things here and there over the months. But what would you just say if I were to ask you, what do you think the state of the Buffalo Sabres is right now?
Can only go up from where they've been. So, with that said, to your point, this is normally when hockey is kind of in full swing. We always say, oh, well, you got to look at the standings on American Thanksgiving, and that tells you it's an indicator, right, if the team's going to make the playoffs or not. Well, what's our new one this year? Valentine's Day? I don't know, but the Sabres themselves, I mean, they're still making moves. I think that they have an idea. They're really trying to construct a roster from top to bottom all the way in Rochester as well that, gets guys that can compete. They got to get experienced guys in here. They made a move for a depth goaltender this week that maybe we can get into for a little bit. But, I mean, I like the moves. I like the draft. You can kind of get an idea of the type of player that they're looking for. They're definitely looking to fill roles. It's not straight up just let's get the best talent, offensive talent across the board. You look at some of the depth signings that they've made. It's clear that they have a vision for slotting guys into certain roles, and I think that's a healthy way to look at building a roster. And I think the draft also, we talked about it, did they draft the best player available to draft? We won't know that for a couple of years. But I think going into the draft, I think they had a profile of a player that they needed to get, and they definitely hit that. I think they needed a scoring winger, and that's what they got with Jack Quinn. So that was kind of the first domino. As they entered free agency, they made some key moves here. And, I get hammered on, I think, a lot on social media for maybe being a little too positive at times. I have the ability to be negative, but right now I don't see a reason to be negative. I'm giving Kevin Adams and his team kind of a blank canvas, a clean slate. And so far, I think they're doing a pretty decent job, given the resources and some of the cost concerns that exist in the organization.
How hesitant, though, are you to give Kevin Adams a clean slate? I know you said you are, but did you have to grapple with that at all, given the track record of the burn rate that the Pegulas have gone through with their GMs, not only in terms of how it's happened and that they fall out of favor, but they fall out of favor quickly. So does Kevin Adams, does he have a blank canvas with the Pegulas, do we think?
Well, he certainly has a really good relationship with them, and there's trust there, where I think that he's off to a more of a head start than Jason Botterill was, or, Tim Murray was for that matter, where he's been in the organization in different roles on the business side of things. I think that there's trust built up, and that lends to just a more seamless work relationship. You can get things done quicker. From my perspective, to answer your question directly, I mean, maybe my stance would be different. Maybe he wouldn't have a clean slate if I didn't know Kevin Adams, or at least, we're not great pals, but we come from the same hockey pedigree with Chris Hicks and the old Niagara Scenic days. And I've had a lot of knowledge about Kevin Adams as a person and the type of human being that he is, which I have no reason to think that he won't succeed in the job. So that's kind of my perspective. And again, maybe that's me being too positive, and that's a fair criticism of me, but that's where I'm at when looking at Kevin Adams and the start that he's given. I'm not the skeptic. And I look at the players that he's brought in, and I can see why they brought in the players that they did. Tim, you and I talked about maybe 6 or 8 months ago, just about, maybe a Sabres, projecting what they might do. This was before Kevin Adams was the GM. We talked about maybe Taylor Hall being a guy that they go out and look for. And they did. And they got the big fish. Now, was that Kevin Adams? No, that's Ralph Kruger being a closer. But I have no reason to believe that the Kevin Adams and Ralph Kruger conglomerate can do good things here moving forward.
What do you make of the public perception of Kevin Adams and, when he was hired and just some of the things that people said because of the way everything went down and then all the cost cutting? What do you make of the public perception? And then how do you think, or what do you think he's done, I guess, to push back against that with some of these moves?
Sabres fans have every right and reason to be skeptical of everything. Okay, so when it comes to the perception of Kevin Adams, I totally get why they're just like, show me. It's that whole show me, don't blow me thing, right? And they're wanting to be shown right now. I think they're eager to get this going. They want to see the team on the ice. Everything's on paper. So the public perception, I totally get it. Where they've been, their chains have been yanked for many years here, really since the Bagulas bought the team and Terry fired his shot of, the whole reason for existence of his team is to win the Stanley Cup. And I think he put a 3-year, not a guarantee, but I mean, the Bagulas did this to themselves too, with a lot of their bravado and, the way that they went about their tank very brazenly. And you can argue whether that tank paid off or not. I still don't think that it has. I don't care if you got the player. You haven't won jack squat. So I get the fans' perception of this is just another move and everything else. Again, my stance on Kevin and Ralph, again, I think Ralph really is running the show, if we're going to be honest here. But it's, I have history with Kevin where I have no reason to believe that he's not going to build a really quality club moving forward.
What do you think about the immediate expectations for this coming season? If this is year 2 of the Ralph Kruger program, what do the Sabres need to do? What do you need to see from the Sabres to think that's going in the right direction?
Got to balance the lineup and don't be afraid to try different things and don't rush your young players up. Okay, so there's no pressure to have Jack Quinn in the lineup right now because they went out and did a pretty decent job filling out the roster in free agency. I think give your young players a chance to breathe a little bit, let their development happen organically. Casey Middlestat, same thing. Okay, he's going to be 22 years old in a couple of weeks here. But, Casey Middlestat just needs to worry about Casey Middlestat. He doesn't need to worry about Dylan Cousins. Comparison is the thief of joy, right? Casey Middlestat needs to see the long haul for his career and just get better and work his way up towards making the Sabres. I don't think he's going to be on the roster this year, at least to start. Getting Taylor Hall, don't be afraid to try different things. I think Jack Eichel and Taylor Hall are going to be locked in together. Find them a winger. Try different wingers. Is it Olsen? Is it Sam Reinhart? Don't be afraid to try Sam Reinhart at center if Eric Stahl is not your bona fide number 2 guy to anchor that line. So I think that my expectations are that I said at the top, it can only go up. I'm sick and tired of watching, the hockey that I've had to watch when I sit down to watch an NHL game. I spend a lot of times up here in this office watching junior hockey and European hockey. When I go and watch the Sabres play, I want to watch a quality product, not as a fan, just as of the Sabres, but as a consumer of hockey. I haven't had that luxury. So I think it's going to take them to try different things. And again, I think that they did a good job bringing experienced players in here to allow their younger players like a Middlestat, like a Will Borgen, who's a right shot defenseman who can play in the NHL probably. Build a good culture down in Rochester too. Get them winning. Got to win at every level of the organization. So that's really my expectation, Jonah, if I'm answering your question in a satisfactory way to you, is that I want to see a team that competes, and I want to see a team that's not afraid to try different things if it leads to wins.
What do you think the Taylor Hall signing does for the organization? Because there's so many different ways to look at it, especially in the context of a 1-year contract. There is some skepticism that you could look at. Maybe they're just buying themselves a draft pick at the trade deadline or what have you, or some assets. Maybe it's a PR move. But there are some actual success metrics that you can plug onto the team right now when you have a player like Taylor Hall, and depending on what line you put him on. I guess what's your quick and dirty overview of the palatability of this signing? Was it and whether why it was done?
It's a whole shot in the arm for the organization and really the city, if you think about it. We've always heard about the Sabres maybe having a disadvantage when it comes to recruiting players. Well, here was the marquee free agent, and he chose to come to Buffalo largely because of his relationship with Ralph Kruger. So I think that, the key to Hall is keeping him healthy. I think you want to weave him right into the leadership group on that team right away. If Jack Eichel's your captain, I would not be surprised at all if they give an A to Taylor Hall and they show him that he's trusted. He's part of the success of this team, both on and off the ice.
Unless he's a bonehead, that should be automatic.
It should be automatic.
Unless he comes in and does something, and he's not. Unless he comes in and does something totally out of left field, then he absolutely has the A coming into the season.
Totally. 100%. Yeah, 100%. I think that, from a counting stats perspective, you want to see 35 goals, 90 points, somewhere around there as a modest benchmarks for him to hit. But I think it boosts the entire roster. Your power play gets better. Victor Olofsson, who's still a young player, doesn't have to shoulder the load of being this guy that is, accounting for X percent of your goals. He can just kind of do his thing and maybe get better matchups. Remember when the Sabres were really good in those early 2000s, and Thomas Vanek didn't have to play on the top line? He scored 41 goals one year, largely because of the matchups he was getting. Maybe an Olofsson has the same type of success rate now, that maybe he can play down the lineup if they're trying different things, and you maybe put him with Stahl and Skinner. I look at it, let's pod these players, man. Okay? Eichel and Hall together, Skinner and Stahl together, mix and match Reinhart, maybe Tage Thompson, who's got a great shot also, and, coming off the injury last year, maybe he can play a bigger role up the lineup. That's why I keep saying try different things. It doesn't have to be all Olsen and Reinhart. And maybe Reinhart is a center, like I said. But to go back to Hall, I don't see it as a one-year deal. I think they're really going to try to show him that this can work. He and Jack can maybe make magic on ice, and he can sign another contract. And then you have to worry about the trickle-down effect from there. What do you do with Reinhart after that? How do you handle the expansion draft? What kind of trades do you do to maneuver for the expansion draft? So there's a lot of story to still be written here. But it's all moot, by the way, if Taylor Hall doesn't stay healthy.
One of the strange things about Taylor Hall and Buffalo being a locale that you can draw him to is that he doesn't – other than the island, other than Long Island, he's played on all the markets that you would put below Buffalo in terms of its appeal. Edmonton, Newark, or wherever. He's probably going to come to Western New York and think, well, this is. He's been here before, obviously, as a visitor, but he's going to spend some time here and think, hey, this is a utopia, hockey heaven, maybe.
Yeah, hockey heaven, where careers go to die, right? Maybe not anymore, but it's kind of the same thing that we said about when Skinner waived his no trade to come to Buffalo. Close to home, the Ontario guys, you see a lot of, if Ontario guys, like we always say, it's like, look at Joe Thornton. All he's doing by playing for the Maple Leafs this year is checking something off the bucket list for a hockey player. You know what I mean? And maybe coming to Buffalo is the next best thing for some of these guys that are Ontario boys, but yeah, Buffalo, you can't compare the Buffalo market. The one thing I will say I will take exception to one thing you say about Long Island. Yeah, the market has been kind of goofy, and they had, the SUV in the corner when they were playing in the rink and all this goofy stuff. Look at what that team has done, though. They lost John Tavares, their cornerstone, for nothing.
I'm talking.
I know what you're saying, but it's like I love what they're doing there. Yeah, but I love what they're doing there. I hear you, though. I know why you mentioned them. I do.
Hey, Kris, when you talk about balancing the lineup and generating more scoring chances that aren't coming from Jack Eichel when Jack Eichel's on the ice, my question is why is Hall and Eichel wedded together and your projections and really everybody looking at the Sabres roster when it seems like a player like Taylor Hall might be the perfect guy to try to create scoring when Jack Eichel's not out there, take pressure off Eichel and get more opportunities, even within a power play, to score that isn't so reliant on one player, because we've shown that, or Skinner's shown, Olofsson's shown, these guys can score with Jack Eichel on the wing. Eichel doesn't really need Taylor Hall to finish for him. Why is it assumed that they're going to play together all the time?
So there's two ways to look at it, and I love that question because, I look at the Bruins. They just load up their top line, Bergeron, Pasternak, Marchand, and they just kind of go, and they're the pace setter for the team. They log the most minutes, they're the number one power play, and that's one philosophy. But then you can look at what Pittsburgh's done with Sidney Crosby, and they've put guys like, Connor Sherry playing with him and Brian Rust and, Dominic Simone, who they didn't even sign. And, they let the strength of the centerman carry two maybe average wingers, and that allows them to put more balance together. The thing that leads me to believe that Hall and Eichel are going to be locked together was Ralph's comments when he recruited Taylor Hall, and he talked about their competitive nature of pushing each other, and it really seems like he's going to try to have them play together and maybe deploy that Bruins philosophy and maybe less of a Penguins philosophy when it comes to using those two players.
How do you think it'll work? They're both kind of puck possession guys. How do you think they'll mesh on the ice just from a play style standpoint?
It's a good question, and it's one of those things that we need to see come out. I don't know if Taylor Hall has really played with a center the caliber of Jack Eichel, where, maybe Taylor Hall's possession numbers have been as good as they have been because he's had to have the puck on a stick to kind of carry the line that way. I think it's one of those things where you need to see it happen to really understand if it's going to be successful or not. And that's kind of where I land with it. What I can tell you is that, Taylor Hall is, I think when he's not the focus of attention for defenders, I think he's going to thrive. So if folks are really drawn to Eichel and maybe he gets a double in some ways and guys are just closing in on Jack, that's going to leave someone open, and it could be Taylor Hall in a lot of instances, and that's going to allow him to use his gifts to score and, his shooting skills and everything else.
Before we get into more of the prospect angle of it, just to kind of wrap up we can talking about the defense on this team. I know it's a big issue. It's a little boring to me because it seems like we're talking about the same things over and over and over again when it comes to the defense. But goaltending, how would you just give your assessment? I know that's your wheelhouse, and I always love getting your opinions on the organizational depth when it comes to goal, and that still seems to be an unaddressed position so far this offseason.
It is. If they have a weakness, I think it's still goaltending. When that second day of free agency started, it was clear to me anyways, if I was in that room with them, it's like, hey guys, this is go time to go out and get Corey Crawford for 2 years. So when you look at free agency, Braden Holtby was out there. He signed a 2-year deal with Vancouver. I think it was in the neighborhood of $4 million. And to me, that was the benchmark for what a guy like Corey Crawford was going to want. Corey Crawford had a great year last year in Chicago, and he would have been a great fit here. That allowed you maybe some flexibility to do something with Hutton if you didn't believe in him. And I'm not sure that Hutton's going to rebound and maybe, earn the dollars that he's getting. So I have concerns there. Obviously, why they didn't pursue a guy like Corey Crawford, because they were waiting to keep those dollars in line because they were in the mix for Hall, and they ended up getting the big fish there. So that's, you can see it happen now working backwards, why they didn't pursue Corey Crawford. I thought that was a miss, though, not getting him. So when you look at the organization top to bottom, to kind of go what happened this week with them signing Dustin Tokarski to a 2-year contract. So you have a 31-year-old guy. He's got somewhere, I think just north of 30 NHL games on his resume. And I think that's important when you need your organizational 3 or 4 that generally you're going to stash in Rochester to have NHL game experience. They didn't really have that right now. If you're looking at, before Tokarski came into the picture, you have Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, they really want to grab the reins and be the guy in Rochester for the next 2 years. And Jonas Johansson, who was an AHL All-Star last year, I suspect that they would have never gone out to get Tokarski if they could get a 2-year contract with Johansson, because that's the guy then that they could have exposed in the expansion draft. The Tokarski move was all about getting veteran depth in there. He can help with Luukkonen's development, but he's also the guy that we can expose to Seattle. Sabres are in trouble, though, man, after this year with goaltending. I don't think there's any question about that. No one should expect Luukkonen to be ready to come up to the NHL after this season. Allmark has to have a good year. You got him on a 1-year contract right now. Hutton's got 1 year left, and I think the writing's on the wall for him. So what's the plan? We need to find out, but I think they're in trouble after this year as far as if you're already looking forward to 2021-22. I don't know what the plan is yet.
Wow. Got to build a bridge to Jackson Baker, and there's a lot of pieces in between there,
Yeah, there's a lot of pieces in between there if you're looking at 17-year-old Jackson Baker coming up and playing. But no, I think that, the Sabres were looking at getting a goalie, entering day 2 of the draft. I strongly believe that they had pick number 100 early in the 4th round, and they were going to take a goaltender there. There were a couple that they were looking at. They had to use 100 to get up and take the German forward, Peterka, and that kind of killed that. They had some other prospects they were looking at, maybe that they would burn a 5th rounder on, and they went right before the Sabres were up. So they didn't get a chance to take another goalie to get him in the system. But again, these are guys that are going to be 5 years off from helping at the NHL level anyways. Eric Portillo is going to be at University of Michigan if they end up playing hockey this year. I mean, I know they're going to, they're scheduled to play, but, even a guy like that's probably 3 or 4 years out. So big problems, I think, in net for the Sabres moving forward. They're doing well addressing the skaters, and they have some sorting out to do with their defensemen. I still think that goaltending is the most important position in hockey. A lot of people want to tell me I'm crazy for saying that. And they're really, I don't know what they're going to do right now.
How are you, Kris Baker, at Sabres Prospects on Twitter, and NHL scouts out there going to evaluate young players this winter? We know that the Ontario Hockey League has said no body checking. You have some additional information that I wasn't aware of regarding some other junior leagues out there and their rules moving forward. I guess how would you describe this landscape that if there is hockey, that's still if all this can happen and everybody passed their tests and things don't crash and who knows what else, but what are we looking at here?
You really got to front load your scouting while they're playing. I think Europe already has stopped playing in certain countries. The Czech Republic shut down for a couple of weeks. Sweden and Finland are having surges where certain organizations are shutting down. So, if you have the ability to get out and see live viewings, you got to get them in when you can. That's now, or the past couple of weeks. But, for a Sabres organization that really shrunk their scouting staff, and they were already going to plan to move to video anyways, this couldn't set up any better for them. Video scouting has its pros and cons. Okay, so you can watch a greater volume of games in a day, and I can attest to that. I watch 4 or 5 games sometimes a day, which is nuts, and I'm fried from it. My brain sucks because of it. But you also the con to that is that you only see what's on the frame, and when you're scouting, you got to see the whole picture. So there's disadvantages to rely on just video. In an ideal world,
there's a reason that hockey is considered a terrible television sport.
Yeah, and that's part of it.
You can only see what's right in front of the camera.
Yep, and that's a challenge because you do want to see, you have to see the whole picture. So there's issues with that. Ideally, you would use video scouting to deploy your live eyes. If you're looking at 10 players on video, pull out the 3 that you want to go watch live. You might not have that opportunity this year. Now, to your comment earlier about what the OHL is doing, they're going to a no body contact style of the sport this year. And that's also filtering down to other leagues, the OJHL, which is their junior A league in Ontario. They're going, they put out their 5-on-5 regulations before we hopped on, about an hour before we did this today, where no body contact, players have to wear masks. You have to wear the bubble face mask. There's going to be strict guidelines for who they're going to let into the arena. Now, that's only in Ontario. But I suspect similar mechanisms are going to be in place for the Alberta Junior A League, the British Columbia Junior A League. We don't even know when the WHL is going to start. The OHL seems to want to start in months from now. We're in November. I mean, we're still about 3 months out before the OHL is even thinking about playing. So everything's upside down right now. If you're the Sabres and you're looking at the pool of draft players, draft eligible players, the USHL is still playing. Their games are set to start this weekend. The NAHL, which is, really you're only taking goalies out of there, okay? They're playing. There's games that have been happening, but I expect everything to be shut down, man. I'm not trying to be a negative Nancy here, but you can already see it. USHL games are going to be canceled in pockets, and at some point you're going to have a pause across the board, just like what's been going on in Europe. Czech Republic, they were playing games for about a good solid 3 weeks to a month. And then their health minister just said, we got to shut everything down. They tried to shut down for just 2 weeks over there. It was about 3.5, 4 weeks. Now they're going to start to try to play games again this weekend. We'll see where it goes. It's just a weird year, man. I think video is going to rule the day when it comes to scouting, and it's going to come with some flaws.
Kris, what do you think or what have you heard about local hockey, junior clubs, recreation, high schools, youth? What is your insight on whether they'll be able to play, when they'll be able to play, how the game will be played locally this coming months?
I think your guess is probably as good as mine, Jonah, honestly. I'm plugged into, the 16U and 18U ranks just by virtue of having a niece and nephew that play at a very high level at those age groups. And like in Chicago right now, they've been going to Detroit and trying to go to Pittsburgh to play games, but every plan gets shut down usually. I think my nephew plays in Chicago. He's only played 4 games so far. Usually they've had 20 to 25 games in. Here in Buffalo, I don't know what the plan's going to be. I mean, we know the junior Sabres, the junior A team that playing in that OJHL that we just talked about with those rules and regulations, they just opted out for the year. And then the junior Sabres 16U and all the age groups below, they went on pause because of a COVID outbreak. So scheduling's tough because a lot of these higher level, they play out of state a lot. And not every state's different right now. Illinois is different from Michigan. The junior Sabres, they play a lot of games against like Little Caesars and Honey Baked in Detroit. And, even going towards, North Jersey, there's a couple of the Avalanche and the Rockets and things like that. There's good teams out there that they want to play. Everything's up in the air right now, Jonah. I just don't know how it's going to shake out. It's such a weird year. Coming into this year, like when we were talking about this in summer, we were saying, be lucky if you have a regular season that starts in January or February, and maybe that's how it still ends up.
Yeah, I think that when you're talking about crossing state lines and all those restrictions that you have, quarantining, especially teams coming into New York and all the tournaments that happen, whether it's at the Northtown Center or downtown, whatever, you might have a situation where if you are allowed to play here in New York, that you're just playing the same teams over and over again. I mean, you might get sick of it, but that's obviously high school. They might be able to have their games, but you're talking about the youth and how dependent they are on teams coming in from Pittsburgh and Cleveland and wherever else just to put these tournaments together. Those probably get dashed pretty quickly. Anything else, Kris, that you want to add that I didn't ask you about?
No, I think that, just to kind of go back to what we talked about at the top of the conversation, I mean, the prospects are still playing right now. There's games in Sweden. Like when we end this call, and I still have work to do, but on that TV will be a game in Sweden. I'll still be putting out video highlights for the guys that are playing. There are a lot of things to like about some of these young players. I think that really more than ever, though, it's going to be about patience, especially with this year. This year, a lot of these guys that I'm reporting on right now, the Sabres are going to try to get over here to play in Rochester. Oskari Laaksonen, who plays for the Pelicans in the Finnish League, is having a great start to his year. Arttu Ruotsalainen, who, as of over the weekend was a top scorer in the Finnish League, young, crafty forward who could really challenge for a roster spot on the Sabres this year. So even though we don't have a lot of hockey going on right now at the NHL or AHL level here in the States, there's a lot going on still in Europe as long as they're playing and have the ability to play. And we'll be keeping an eye on them all. And I just wanted to make sure I got that plug in to watch the Twitter feed for video highlights and everything else.
At Sabres Prospects, we'll be plugging the whole thing. We'll do it through the show. We'll remind everybody. It's compelling content because you can't get it anywhere else unless you know exactly who it is that's in the Sabres organization and you have Google Alert set up or whatever, or you can just have Kris Baker do it for you and he'll give you all the updates on where these guys are playing, what team they're with this year, who they got loaned out to, whether they've been traded, transcribing tweets or whatever the hell you'd need to do, or not translating, I should say.
And I'll do my best to reply to those questions after the election dust is settled. I'm trying to not pay as much attention to Twitter right now, but I go on there, I tweet, and I get the hell out of there, man. That's kind of the plan right now.
That's smart to do. It's good philosophy. Kris Baker, again, follow him at Sabres Prospects on Twitter. One of the great Fs of TGAF. And he hasn't been on in a while, so it's good to have one of our best Fs back on TGAF.
Appreciate the time. Of course. Yeah. Hey, thanks for having me. Appreciate it. Nice seeing your faces. We'll do it soon, hopefully live.
See you soon, bud.
All right, man.
And we're joined for a third week in a row because he is so gracious with his time. Former Bills scout Gerald Dixon joining us on Tim Graham and Friends, brought to you by CTBK. Gerald, thanks for coming back.
Man, thanks for having me back again, fellas.
The analysis has been so good, and so it means a lot to us that you'd keep in, your willingness to keep coming back and sharing it with us. And a fascinating game this week that let's just jump into it, because even though Seattle is in the NFC, the Bills have had a couple cracks at measuring stick games. You can maybe call New England a measuring stick opponent because of the history, but New England's not the same as it's been. Seattle is the same, much like Kansas City and Tennessee being a kind of an established team in and of itself, especially making the AFC Championship game last year. So what are your thoughts on what the Bills are looking at here? How significant is this game, even though it is a non-conference game, even though there is still 8 games left in the season? But when Seattle's coming to your town, what kind of emphasis should the organization be putting on this one?
Well, I mean, I don't think you should put a lot of pressure on just one game, but as competitors, you always want to be tested to see where you're at. And I believe Seattle is a good test at the halfway mark, as you can say. And the way I look at it is, organization-wise and just player-wise, I would just look at my young talent to see how well those guys have matured. And the young guys that I'm talking about is the quarterback, Josh Allen, Tre'Davious White, Tremaine Edmonds. It's a big game for these guys to say, you know what, NFL, we have arrived, and the Buffalo Bills are here to stay for a while, because I believe that's what Brandon and Sean is trying to instill and build with the Bills.
Yeah, they haven't really had a statement victory this year. They've had nice wins. I think the win against the Rams was very impressive. Would have been better had they not given up a lead after however many points it was, 21 or 24 points. But there hasn't been that persuasive, I used that word earlier in the week, that just like convince me that everything's going to be okay from a fan standpoint. You know, like this could be one of those games. I think no matter how you beat a team like the Seahawks, you're probably saying that was a persuasive win.
I agree. Because I know that Josh is a competitor, and he wants to compare himself against the top quarterbacks. And other than Russell Wilson, he's coming to town. So you got to sit there and say, okay, good. I know that I don't want to make it myself versus a quarterback, Russell Wilson, but at the end of the day, we all know it's going to come down to that, right? It's going to come down to third downs. It's going to come down to explosive plays. It's going to come down to who's not turning the ball over and who's going to control the ball game with legs and his arms. And whatever quarterback plays the better half of that game in the second half, like I always say, football doesn't really get played until the fourth quarter. That's where you're going to get the winner.
Gerald, last week we talked a lot about cornerbacks and what makes a good shutdown cornerback, and kind of a similar conversation, I guess. I'm fascinated by these receivers that are going to be on the field on Sunday, particularly for the Seahawks. DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, 2 very different guys. But you mentioned Tre'Davious White. This could be one of those statement type of games. As a former cornerback yourself and somebody who's coached the position, what is the challenge that Tre'Davious White faces going up against a guy like DK Metcalf with his just physical gifts, size, speed, the whole package?
Well, like you said already, just big, fast, explosive human being, right? But not that great of change of direction and being able to change his speed. And I always thought it was easier when he played against just straight line, fast guys, because at the end of the day, if you're playing off man, like Tre'Davious is very good at, and he's good at reading routes, those taller, explosive players with a straight line speed and not a lot of wiggle in their hips typically tell you what route they're going to run once they get into about 8 to 10 yards. So once you're off and you're backpedaling, slow and backpedaling out, and you're reading through the quarterback, through the receiver, it's a telltale what route he is going to run. So I think it's going to be a difficult matchup, but just because of the route savvy that Trey White has in terms of reading routes and the average route running ability of DK Metcalf, I think Tre'Davious is going to fare out pretty well with that matchup. But also, when you look at it, you got to go on the other side and say, okay, you can stop the first route, right? And then plays get extended. And we all know that Russell is one of the better quarterback at extending plays and throwing those beautiful placement balls to those receivers. And
what about Tyler Lockett on the other side? Lines up in the slot a ton, and it's hard to, it would be hard enough if it was just erase DK Metcalf and, that's that. But to have a guy like Tyler Lockett on the other side, what challenge is that going to present to the secondary?
Well, just in terms of, I believe Tyler is when he gets in a slot, that's when he's really, really good. And T. Johnson this year he's been real inconsistent in terms of his man coverage ability. And when you have a guy with the route running ability and the body control and the hands and just the understanding of zone versus man, and he and Russ are on, I mean, they're locked in right now. They've been locked in for a couple of years, but right now they're in sync with each other. That's where I think the game can be changed and in favor of the Seattle with the nickel and slot matchup. I would give that bump up to Seattle, in my humble opinion.
We know that Matt Milano has already been ruled out for Sunday. Tremaine Edmonds has had a pretty shaky season so far, and A.J. Klein has not wowed people. I'm being diplomatic, I think. Here you got Russell Wilson coming in, and we just talked about where he can throw the ball. What would be your level of concern, or what can the Bills do maybe with their call-ups, or maybe they can do something on the defensive line? I don't know. I mean, that's where your expertise comes in. Well, what would you do to stop Russell Wilson from his ability to just take off and run against a defense that's struggled to stop it?
Right. Unlike most mobile quarterbacks, most guys are just trying to get outside the pocket and try to go to their strong shoulder. But what Russell's shown you over the years is he's willing to step up and out to throw the ball. That's going through navigating the pocket well, getting good depth and getting away from those tall guys. Because I don't think a lot of people understand that's one of the better things that Russell does. He gets away from those guys up front and gives himself an opportunity to see over the line of scrimmage. Because everyone's always saying, oh, he's a short quarterback. No, he gets away. And then he has enough poise and feel in the pocket to navigate that. But what I believe is if you can have those two inside guys, power rush, bull rush, take those guards and put it back into Russell's lap and take those two ends and form a cup and not necessarily get to him, but make sure that if he is going to go anywhere, if he steps up, he's going to have to step up into the lap of his two guards, and if he does go outside, maintain that outside leverage. And then that's where I believe that you can make him truly a pocket quarterback without getting out and extending those plays.
Do you think Harrison Phillips and Ed Oliver and those guys will be able to do that?
I believe Ed can, because I'm not so high on the Seattle's offensive line. And when you have a guy, Quentin Jefferson, going back and playing against his team, you get a little bit more, you get a little bit more pumped. So I think this might be one of his better games. And he understands those guys, and I think he'll play a little bit better and give those guys a little more push up front, and also get his hands up because he's been able to knock the ball down the last couple of weeks.
When you flip to the other side of the ball, the Seahawks, everybody talks about all the yards they give up. They've been getting toasted over the top of the defense in the passing game, but they are getting Jamal Adams back. I know he's just one guy. Can one guy make that big of a difference? Is he good enough to help some of the problems that they've been having?
Well, when you speak of Jamal is a jack of all trades, master of none, in my opinion. He's more of this. You got to be aware of him when he's around the line of scrimmage. On the back end, I'm not really worried about him because even from college to the NFL, his production in the pass game has not been high, right? He's an average at best cover guy. The game that he did play against New England, I mean, Julian Edelman probably had the best game that he had all year. So if you're Brian Dable, you're trying to find ways to put him into coverage. And if you're Josh Allen and Brian, you're trying to locate where he is in the line of scrimmage or at the line of scrimmage, because he's very good at blitzing. As an eighth defender, he's a very sure tackler. He's not afraid to shoot gaps when they open up. So when I look at him more him and Buda Baker in the same realm as guys that are safeties, but they play more of a dime linebacker role and more disruptive around the line of scrimmage than on the back end. So on the back end, I don't believe they'll get help in terms of coverage, but where they can get help is when he's a blitzer, and he's good at that, as you can see over the years, as a playmaker.
Gerald, you sound like you know what you're talking about.
A little bit.
But I don't know. I'm not convinced.
Okay.
No, the analysis is awesome. I like the fact that you're willing to come on this show every week. It's a blessing.
Right.
Thank you.
Right.
I'm being sarcastic, a wise ass, which
what you're good at.
Yeah, that's true.
So let me throw.
I enjoy doing it. I don't know if I'm good at it. I enjoy doing it.
No, you're pretty good at it. So let me throw something at you real quick, and and if you think about it, and when you go into games, it's all, to me, you look at the matchups and who wins these matchups, and most likely that's who's going to come out victorious at the end of the game. If you're the Bills and you're saying this, Seattle has struggled in coverage. The Bills have run more 10 personnel. That's 4 wide receivers, more than most teams in the NFL. You'd like to get into that package because over the last few weeks, you've seen Tyler Kroft either put the ball on the ground or catch a wide open pass and stumble. So your fourth receiver is better than your tight end. Knox is just coming off of his COVID list, and he's been inconsistent with the ball in his hand. So if you can get to where you can run the ball in 10 personnel and be creative with that, also find ways to put Adams in coverage with either Beasley or Steph Diggs. And then you can find those little matchups that you like a little bit more than your traditional ones with the tight end versus Adams. My humble opinion.
What do you think about, there's been a lot of questions about, first 4 weeks, Josh Allen crushing man coverage. They're running all these crossing patterns and everything's just clicking. Big plays all over the place, tons of yards, tons of touchdowns. Last 4 weeks, teams are playing more zone. They're dropping back on him. It's not as if teams are just going to do that forever and he'll never hit another big play again. What does he have to do to break through that? Maybe either to change how defenses are playing or just beat how they're playing and get those big plays when teams do decide to play more zone.
So look at it in two folds. As a play caller, be a little bit more creative in the ways that you're designing plays for guys to get open. 1. 2, it comes on your shoulders now, Josh, to say, well, I'm going to throw an accurate ball in the right spot and to the right person to execute those vertical throws. And when he gives guys those opportunities, just finish it with a catch.
Gerald, you mentioned at the top wanting to look at Josh Allen and how he develops and where his development is in this game. What are the things you're looking for there, and maybe if projected long term? What does he need to show to be considered in that level with a quarterback like Russell Wilson, and when it comes up time for a new contract, to be paid like a quarterback like Russell Wilson?
Well, the ability to control the game, for me, that's one, and I'll get into that a little bit more. Just 2 examples: control the game, and also win games when you're not supposed to. So beat good teams. Just don't beat teams that's under 500. Now, when I say control the game, execute on third down, right? Play keep away, and keep away means don't turn the ball over to the other team with the other helmet, right? And when those explosive plays present themselves, execute and finish games. Because at times you'll see Josh have just a mind, he just loses it mentally, and you'll have 1 or 2 hiccups in the game, but the 1 or 2 hiccups are in the red zone, or they're backed up. So now you're giving the opponent an opportunity to score. And now with the explosive plays, man, sometimes that arm is so strong, he gets so much and he's so hyped up that he rips it, and it's 2 or 3 yards past the receiver. It's just more of just getting comfortable with your ability, being comfortable in the pocket and poised to just deliver it and drop it off like you've done at practice the hundreds and thousands of times that you've done it.
And being halfway through his third year quarterback that started from almost day one, how far in that development curve is he? How much better can he be in some of the things that he still hasn't mastered yet?
Well, look at it like this, and I know that I'm not gonna. Josh was a junior college quarterback, right? And then he played at Wyoming for a year, 2, right? So what you're getting is a guy that hadn't thrown the ball a lot around elite coverage and with elite players. So essentially, he's not. To me, he's not in the category of where he was. Everybody was saying in the first 4 games he's an NFL MVP. He's not there yet. He's still in the phase of learning the game, learning coverage, and learning his ability and being comfortable with it. So I don't know many JUCO quarterbacks that come out into the NFL and in 2.5 years are ready to make that jump to elite ability. I've known guys that played for 4 years and they're still not ready. So to answer your question, not going any further, I think he's a second-tier, third-tier quarterback right now with his play that he's shown you. Does he have the traits to be an elite quarterback? I think he has a trait to be a good quarterback. I think he has a trait to be, as I've always said, his comp is Matthew Stafford with athletic ability.
Gerald, without like getting into super deep nuance of quarterback play, and this is a feel thing. And this is somebody who, I throw out all those caveats. Didn't play the game, not at any level that to speak of. And I tend to believe that what we have seen in the past few weeks of Josh Allen is closer to where he truly is right now in his development than those first 3 or 4 games. That those first 3 or 4 games, as much as it was dazzling and everybody jumped and said, all right, he figured it out. I would like to have seen that to continue, of course, but I think that the fact that it slid back compared to what we've seen last year, it just seems to me that this is closer than.
Right.
Why was he able to thrive so much in those first 4 weeks? Now, of course, you can look at the quality of the opponent and things like that, but it seems as though it's a totally different guy. And I don't really think anything happened injury-wise. I don't think that he's a guy whose confidence gets shook. Well, I mean, maybe it did. That's a fragile thing. Some guys are super confident, but you can still get in your head. I mean, I'm asking you, as you've been around it, the sports psychology of it, or what you see from an X's and O's standpoint. It's just such a stark line was drawn between those first 4 games and what we've seen since.
Right. Now, I think everyone was excited just because you saw the growth. It's just a jump from year 2 to year 3. For the first 4 games, you're saying, whoa, I've never seen it before. And I'm like, man. But I've always said, when you give coordinators enough film to study you, they're going to take away the things that you do well, and they're going to force you to play and make you throw it for a quarterback, make throws with things with routes and concepts that you're not comfortable with. The real good ones, the elite ones, regardless if you take it away, they can find a way. A la what you saw last night with Devontae Adams on that 3rd down route. Yeah. A-Rod said he's going to put it in there, and he's going to put it in a spot that you're not going to get to. I'm just better than you are. So
the 3rd or 4th thing that I do well is still better, is still good enough to get it done. So you can take away the best couple things I do, but I'm still going
to do it.
Yeah.
I'm still good enough. And when you're truly elite, regardless of what you do, I'm still better than what you're trying to do. Now, if you said I'm going to put 3 guys on this one guy and I got to throw it to my worst player, I'm going to make my worst player look good. So, long story short, to fix it, coordinators have seen what Josh and Dave's are comfortable with. Now you have to go to your left hand, if you're right-handed, and play with your left hand and develop that. And now take checkdowns, And the small window of opportunities that you get, you have to take advantage of them. And that's what I haven't seen the Bills offense do in the last few weeks, if that answers your question.
It does, yeah.
When we flip it to the other side of the ball, this defense, you know, it's interesting. These two defensive secondaries, the Seahawks are allowing so many yards, but they're picking the ball off. They're getting interceptions. The Bills defense doesn't really allow the big plays, but you're looking at Tre'Davious White, Micah Hyde, Jordan Poyer. None of them have an interception. Right. How much of that is luck of getting the ball thrown your way, and how much is that an indictment of them that they're not making those plays and forcing those mistakes, and how much is that holding them back, I guess?
Now, in the past, it was the opposite, right? They'll give up a few, but they'll make a few, right? And that evened out everything. You know, interceptions are things that they come in bunches, and some guys, the ball just gets to them. But at the end of the day, most of the times when you get picks, they're going to say tips and overthrows, right? Right. Tips are when guys at the line of scrimmage are getting their hands up, or the quarterback has enough pressure in his face that he's not going to throw a pass that he can step into and feel comfortable with it, right? Overthrows, right? Same thing. There hasn't been enough pressure on the quarterback to allow those guys on the back end to get tips, overthrows, and just inaccurate passes from what I've seen from the previous years. Previous years, they were getting after the quarterback. Quarterback wasn't comfortable. There's indecisions, inaccuracy of the throws, and that's when DBs tend to make more plays on the ball. So until they improve their ability to get pressure on the quarterback, that's when you're going to see it. And you're not going to get pressure if you allow teams to run for almost 5 yards per carry.
How much do you think Tremaine Edmonds' shoulder injury from earlier in the season, I believe it's not on the injury report anymore the last few weeks, but do you think it's still affecting his play in any way?
Well, you know what? Injuries are part of the game, right? And at some point, you have to deal with it. And shoulder or no shoulder, if you're watching the game, he has a lot of false reads when you see it. Now, he's never been a take-on, not back the blocker type guy. He's always been a long, rangy, fairly above average athlete that can slip blocks at the point of attack. But he has never been truly a downhill thump Mike linebacker. He's always been a guy when if you run away from him, he can run you down and make those plays. So at some point, you got to grow up, bite the bit, toughen up, and bloody somebody's nose. You're Mike linebacker. End of the day.
Would he have been better off not being a Mike linebacker, you think? Maybe playing outside? Or would he have had the same problems?
I don't even think it's truly a problem. I just believe that we've never seen a linebacker 6'4", 6'5", right?
Yeah.
Like when you're that tall and that rangy, you typically play high, and it's hard to get underneath guys or blockers and knock them back. But what he does have, he has like long arms, and he has God-given ability to run. So at some point, he's going to have to find the way that he plays at a high level, and that's studying. Go back and study Urlacher. All right, figure out what Urlacher did. Urlacher was real good at keying, diagnosing, getting downhill, and finding plays. Right. Look at Luke Kuechly. At Mike linebacker's instincts, and I don't think he has the greatest instincts. He has decent instincts, but he has athletic ability. So spend a little bit more time in the film room, understanding where the pulls and the zones are going. Find your crack within that defense, and at times you just got to pull the trigger and shoot it. And there's times that he's just holding back too much for me and not just going. Like you see Milano just run in there and just throw his body around with no regard. Trey, not so much.
Yeah, and Milano pays the price for it. Another game that he'll be on the sidelines. But when he's out there, you know what you're going to get.
That's the only way that he knows how to play. I'm telling you, he's not big enough to sit there and take on 300-pounders, shock, shed, and get rid of them and play. So he's going to try to find creases within the defense, shoot it, and he has enough speed and closing ability and suddenness to finish the play. At some point, you got to play linebacker.
Is Darren Lee somebody that can help this defense if he gets out on the field at some point soon?
Just with his sheer athletic ability and his ability to run, yes. And he's always had good coverage ability. Now just learning the defense and find his way to fit, I believe he can help. But D. Lee's always had the issue of taking on blockers and being physical at the point of attack. And at some point, you got to figure out your role and how you're going to either not take blocks on, slip them, and get in the backfield, or just every now and then thump somebody.
Gerald, let's end up with on a positive note here, because I think that this player, as much credit as he's gotten, I think is still underrated, because I think that's how impressive he's been. And part of that's my fault. I haven't written about him as much as I probably should have. I think Stefon Diggs has been incredible. And I think I see him on a weekly basis making it look easy.
Right.
Now, I know he has his baggage or from whatever happened in Minnesota where things didn't go well. We haven't seen that here. Maybe we never do. Maybe it's all a myth. I don't know. Some players have this mystique that follows them around and it's not necessarily justified. What's your take on him so far, what you've seen, and the idea that Minnesota decided to trade this guy away?
Well, I'm not going to touch on why they traded him away. They've had him for a while, and then they thought that his value wasn't worth the price that they were paying. So they did what they had to do. I love him. I think he's he's a top 10 receiver in the NFL. And again, you can't go wrong when you have a guy coming from Maryland, right? Montgomery County, Maryland. Fail with that, right?
I didn't even think of that.
It's coming.
You're such a homer.
It's coming. The metropolitan area, DMV is what they call it now. It's coming. So, but
You are a homer.
in terms of what Steph brings to the game, he's in the same area in terms of, or same ranking with me with Devontae Adams as a route runner, right? Those guys and Keenan Allen, their ability to change speed and separate at the top of the route is unbelievable. And when you have, and when you're a quarterback, you know that he's going to get separation. And what he's brought to this team is the element of being able to uncover himself when he's going against an elite defender, and just the confidence that the quarterback has in him is just saying, hey, listen, I know that even if I stare him down, he's going to get open. And that's what he brings in terms of, if you want to say a number one receiver, yeah, that's what he is. And a superstar.
Okay, so what is it about me, my untrained eye, when I see him? What am I picking up on that's so impressive that makes him different than just anybody else? Why does he make it, to the layman, why does he make it look so easy? As opposed to, you see a great receiver out there, you can tell he's working, he's, an underneath guy, slot guy, or just a guy who runs, fly patterns. There's something about it that just makes it look, you're stunned when he doesn't make the play.
Well,
stunned maybe too harsh a word, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, I get you. His ability to change speed, right? And I always talk about that because everybody always thinks that if you're a receiver, you got to run fast. Yeah, run fast. But if I know that you're running fast and I'm off at 8 yards, I can flip and run with you. I already have an 8-yard start on you. But what Steph does, he is so smooth and sudden at the same time. So you see him coming off, and you're like, he's not running fast. Then he has the ability to change speed, then put his foot in the ground without any change in his body, and be able to come out of it with explosion to create separation. So he lulls a lot of people to sleep. You say, oh yeah, he's not running fast. Then he speeds up, stops, explodes out of it with a cut. And that's where you see him and you say, wow, he's not even running that hard. He's not. He just looks real smooth doing it.
Yeah, he's incredible.
Yeah.
Maybe
Who's going to be the best receiver on the who will be the best receiver in this game on Sunday?
Oh, Steph Diggs.
Think it's not close? He's that much better than DK and Lockett?
See, DK is
What if Metcalf was from Baltimore?
Then I still say Steph Diggs.
All right.
Um,
I got to even this. I got to even the scales in some way for this.
Well,
comparison.
DK is an Ole Miss guy, so that might be playing into it here. If he was a Bama guy, I don't know.
No, I respect DK.
What if Tyler Lockett went to Johns Hopkins? Then who?
He's still out in Baltimore, so he don't count. Nah, so you got to be from Montgomery County. But either way, no, I like Tyler. I think Tyler is one of the most underrated receivers in the NFL. But DK, he's so big, fast. It's ridiculous, right? But at some point, you're going to have to develop a little bit more route savvy to scare an elite corner. Because like I said earlier, when you're playing against a guy that predetermines his route about 3 yards, being able to not come to a full stop, it's easier to put your foot in the ground and come out of it if you're a corner, rather than a guy like Steph Diggs or Tyler Lockett that can change speed, stop, get out of it immediately, right? And just suddenness to get out of his break. You'll see a lot of chops in DK in his feet at the top of his route. So if he ever gets better at the top of his route, which is, I haven't seen it, I would put him into that elite category with Julio Jones, because he has a lot of Julio Jones traits, right? But Julio Jones over the last years has become one of the better route runners for a tall and explosive guy. So the comparison to Megatron, I think it's comparable, because Megatron only had a few routes in him as well too.
When you were a corner, did you ever have anybody do anything close to you like DK Metcalf did to Buda Baker a few weeks ago when he chased him down and tackled him? Impossible.
Now, I've ran a lot of guys down. I've walked a lot of people down. Yeah, that ain't happening. I don't care if you run a 4.1. I was talking to I was talking to Roman Harper. I'll give a shout out to Roman. And I said I would have to either I pulled a hamstring or something, but there's no way on this green earth that I'm going to get walked down like that. You can give
about Shane Bailey having it happen to him, Ben Watson of all people. You remember that play?
Yeah, Ben is a tight end.
Right.
Ben can roll. Yeah.
Champ Bailey, Hall of Famer.
Yeah, okay. Tight end.
I understand Don Beebe chasing down Leon Lett. All right?
Listen, 200 and Ben, you know what? Ben can roll too. But either way, that's a corner running down a tight end, not a receiver running down a defensive back. No, not happening. Something's gonna happen. My hamstring, a cramp, something. But there's no way that you're gonna walk me down. That's gonna be on NFL films for the next 150 years. The greatest walk down ever.
Oh, and based on what you're saying, all he had to do was run in some zigzags, make DK change direction, and he would have been all set.
That's all I'm saying. Do something. Run across do something. Act like you're out of breath, but just don't get walked.
He's going to be a meme for a long time.
Oh, man. You better make some money off of that.
Or if he just stopped, DK Metcalf would have kept going for about 10 yards.
Listen. Do something other than get tackled.
Gerald Dixon, thanks for doing this, man. I don't know. Can we chalk you up for next week already? Is this becoming are we wearing you out?
No. Pencil me in. I'm here.
This is a lot of fun. Well, we'll come up with some. We don't want to just break down the game. We'll come up with some positional stuff. I feel a lot smarter after we talk.
Listen, we got to get in some top 10, top 5. We got to do something.
All right.
I got a list.
I'll shoot you so that way you're prepared. So that way you're not doing it off the top of your head. A couple days in advance, I'll throw a topic out there, and we'll see how many Maryland/Alabama guys end up on the list.
Yeah, I want to know.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, you go ahead, John.
Well, I want to know, maybe you can think about this over the week, if you got a power ranking or a list of Alabama media beat writers and where certain people might fall on that list.
You follow Mike Rodak down there?
You know what? Mike is down there. How's he doing? Does he love T-Town?
He lives in Birmingham.
He's in Birmingham?
Yeah.
One of the most underrated cities. Right? One of the most underrated cities.
Never been. But I think he's doing well. I think he and his family love it, and I think he's doing well. And in fact, I saw he's writing basketball stories now. So they're, he's tracking down Nate Oates and talking about Crimson Tide basketball. So I think between those two seasons, he's plenty busy. It's got to be like covering an NFL team. Probably not much different than when he was covering the Bills, when you go down there and cover the Crimson Tide.
Yeah, you just can't step on Nick's toes.
I think that may have happened.
Easier said than done.
I think we've heard some story, yeah.
You get put in the penalty box real quick.
Does he wear lifts?
Huh?
Does he wear lifts? You don't pretend like you didn't hear me. You heard me.
Does he wear lifts?
Does Nick Saban wear lifts?
No, he just looks like a giant because he's sitting on top of all those national championship rings.
I see. Okay. All right, we'll stop there. Gerald Dixon, thanks for doing this, man. Very nice of you.
All right, appreciate you. Thanks for having me on.
Take care.
All right, take care.
Here he is, coming off a 3-0-1 week because he was dealing out bonus picks. Joel Staniszewski on the line from Vegas, joining Tim Graham and Friends, brought to you by CTBK. Joel, 3-0-1 last week. He told you to take the Bills on the money line. He told you to take the under. And we forced him, I think, out of habit, he gave us a pick against the spread. He said to take the Bills and give the 3 points, and it ends right at 24-21. So that's a push. And he just threw in, just for the hell of it, a bonus pick, Denver, which I think caught a lot of people by surprise, including their opponent. And so Joel is now up to 9-4-1. On the year.
That's not bad.
And that's all against the spread. That's Vegas. That's money. That's profit right there. 9-4-1 is solid. You're happy with, you got to be happy with that, right?
Just because our voting people can't count votes doesn't mean I can't count money.
That's right. Yeah, I don't know. It's like Raleigh Massimino running the four corners down there. Although I think that reference predates everybody. Raleigh was the UNLV basketball coach for a bit when I was out there. Pretty much just stole money from UNLV to put together a donkey program. But anyways, strange going on there in Nevada. Maybe by the time anybody's listening to this, Nevada will have decided what's happened in its state for its elections. Alaska, nobody cares about Alaska. We haven't heard from Alaska yet either, but.
Yeah, they don't even have anything yet. They don't even know what they're talking about.
Nevada's just going to waltz in once it's all decided, so that way they weren't controversial.
Right. Yeah, they'll just wait. They'll just wait till it's decided, and then, oh yeah, by the way, we're ready. We're ready to tell you.
I do think that had something to do with it a little bit, because Arizona was called so quickly. I think Nevada's like, Nevada went like a full 24 hours without reporting a vote. Zero. I think,
hanging out.
Arizona.
But that's what they do. They do a once-a-day update.
They didn't on Wednesday, though. Tuesday night, they gave an update, and then so I go to bed at 1 or 2 in the morning, or I don't know what it was. But it was and then they give a report on television that Nevada's not going to update until tomorrow at noon Eastern time at the earliest. Tomorrow meaning Wednesday. And then they didn't do anything all day. And then they came out late Wednesday night and said, maybe Thursday.
Taking their time.
Imagine if that's what it was.
I was going to say your tax dollars at work, but there are no state taxes.
No tax dollars. I think we're like 49th in the country in education. So
those are your casino losses at work, because that's who pays.
Exactly.
That's how the state gets paid out there. All those
your resort fees.
Yes. Me, I pay the taxes when I go out there, my hotel tax, and whatever else I leave out there. So Joel, Seattle coming to Orchard Park. The Seahawks are favored by 3. The total is 55. The numbers haven't really moved all week. What's your general take here for your 6-2 Bills?
The numbers have been pretty solid all week. You'll notice some juice moving around. Bills -3 or +3, -110, -115. Some spots now have it at -120. It's just kind of moving all around. But the juice is that 3, that key number, especially when we see the Bills and Seahawks playing fairly close games. They don't want to really move off of that 3. And until they get some serious action on one side or another, they'll just move around the juice here and there. I don't really see that number moving too much. It's pretty much a pretty solid number. I would have, if I was just looking at the spread and in a perfect world and not a less popular team versus a more popular team, I would say the Seahawks maybe -2.5, 1.5 or 2.5, depending upon like weather is a huge thing. Also with the total, injuries are a huge thing, but I think 3 might be a touch high, but it's not way out of whack, I don't think.
What about the total? I mean, with it being
total seems about right.
I know the weather plays in a part there, but
yeah, weather will play a huge part into where it moves to. But it seems pretty much spot on. 2 offenses that can move the ball. One of which is known for scoring more. More recently, Buffalo has calmed down their scoring, but still has a really high-powered offense against 2 very lackluster defenses. Seattle being I think they're the worst team in the league against the pass. And because of their injuries to the running back room, I feel like they're going to be passing even more than normal. So you're going to see a lot of passing. You're going to see, as a Bills fan, when you watch it, you're going to see Seattle just marching down the field, and you're going to be like, just please stop them, on like a 3rd and 7, when you normally are thinking like, oh, cool, punt. Not going to happen. You might not see any punts in this game. So yeah, the total seems it's a little high, but it makes sense for these 2 teams, the way that they're playing and the way that they can move the ball and the way that their defenses are not playing.
The total almost seem low. I mean, I know it's what the highest over under in the league this week, I think. Last I checked, when I was looking earlier, but I mean,
I've seen a couple like low 50s, but nothing at 55. It's definitely the highest.
But I mean, if the Seahawks get to 30, it's you can see it pretty easily.
Both teams getting to 30 quickly. So if I'm not a huge better of totals, but looking at it on paper, this seems like this is just a stone cold lock to go over.
Uh-oh. Let me jot that down.
I'm not saying put 2 stars next to it, but I am saying take the over.
You wouldn't bet a finger. What about a toe?
Like a pinky toe? Yeah, a pinky toe. I'll bet a pinky toe.
Yeah, right. You don't need that.
Hang up on what I get back on the pinky toe.
Yeah, what's he betting? Yeah, he's betting to lose that. I mean, is he getting your pinky toe back?
I wouldn't bet my pinky toe for somebody else's pinky toe. I need like a $10,000 versus a pinky. Then I would bet it, I think.
How about this number, Joel? What do you make of this? This is a straight up number, but the Seahawks have won 10 in a row when playing in the Eastern time zone. That is incredible to me. You're talking about, the dreaded Pacific to Eastern time zone switch. I mean, that's supposed to be the big problem that teams that play out in the Pacific have, is coming east as opposed to, teams having an easier time when they go east to west. But here are the Seahawks. Haven't lost since Jacksonville in 2017, 10 in a row. And let me go back a little farther. You can go back to 2013, and they are 20-5. 10 in a row, 20-5. What do you make of that? And can you apply, and how do you apply that?
Yeah, that's a big thing, traveling west to east, and they're the furthest west, and we're one of the furthest east. I don't know what flight is further. If you're going from probably Seattle, like Miami is probably the furthest. But that's normally something that you take into account is a team traveling west to east, and Seattle really doesn't have that big of a problem. Even when they went from Seattle to Toronto a couple of years ago, that was a blowout. And I know that the time before that they came to Buffalo was when opening week. I don't remember the year, but Brian Moorman threw a touchdown to Ryan Denny or something like that on a fake field goal. Was something. The game was amazing.
I want to say it was 2004, maybe. Would have had, well, maybe it was before realignment. So that way it
wasn't that year, but 6 or 7.
It was a little later, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, because I lived out here at that point in time. But that was before Russell Wilson. That was like Matt Hasselbeck, I think, and so you can't even compare that game. And you can't even really compare you can't even compare the Toronto game because the team that we have now is nothing compared to that team, and Seattle mostly too, with the exception of Russell Wilson, and that's probably it. I can't think of any other player or at least starter that played when Seattle destroyed us in Toronto.
Yeah, that was 2009, or now I just lost it. 2008. Yeah, Ryan Denny, 19-yard pass from Brian Moorman in the third quarter to bust it up.
Great play. I remember that.
Other big names in that game, Robert Royal with a 30-yard touchdown from Trent Edwards. Roscoe Parrish had a 63-yard punt return. So huge day. If you started Bills defense and special teams, you probably
you were
won
chilling
the fantasy league that week. I don't know. 5. Matt Hasselbeck got sacked 5 times, threw an interception. Oh yeah, you definitely won your league if you played the Bills defense that week.
I did. I remember doing that week.
That's awesome.
So Joel, here we are at the halfway mark with your Buffalo Bills. What are your general thoughts? Maybe not from a betting standpoint, but what's your state of mind heading into the backstretch here?
Yeah, a lot of people look at the season in quarters. So the first quarter we did really well. Second quarter we did 2-2, and this is probably the toughest stretch of 4 games that we have. If we can go 2-2 over these next 4 games, I'd be really happy. Anything more than that is just amazing. So this is really going to see what type of team we are. We started out looking pretty much unstoppable on offense. Our defense has kind of stepped up in the last couple of games. Our offense is moving the ball, but not scoring as much. And that the point of the season is to get into the playoffs. That's when you want to be at your absolute best and your absolute healthiest is going into the playoffs. Who cares if you win, 15 in a row, 16 in a row, like the Patriots did, and then you lose in the Super Bowl. Like, great, you had an awesome regular season, you lost in the Super Bowl. And same goes for the Bills and those 4 consecutive Super Bowls. So you want your team to be winning and you want your team to be playing well and getting through the games that you're supposed to get through. But you want to be at your best at the end of the season going into the playoffs. So this is the time of the year where you want to see your team firing on all cylinders on all levels of the game. So, if we start to turn the corner here and go back to the offense that we saw in the first 4 weeks and our defense continues to improve, then I think we're in a great spot. We beat the Patriots on a game that maybe a lot of fans were disappointed in, that we barely beat this team, but we're still going against one of the greatest coaches, if not the greatest coach in the history of the NFL, regardless of players that he has on the field. So, winning a game basically by the amount of points that we were supposed to win by, so says Las Vegas and the odds makers, then that's a victory. Seattle has won games, but they haven't really beaten anybody substantial that I would say. So I think we're in a good spot. I think if we continue to improve offensively and defensively, I think we're going to be in a great spot as the season comes to an end.
Speaking of
The
Vegas,
Bills won this game.
oh, go ahead, Joe.
Tim. I just want to, if the Bills won this game outright, how might that change your perception or the sharp gambler's perception of how good the Bills are?
I think a lot. What we see a lot of times from, commentators and pundits is when the Bills win, it's the other team lost the game. Well, Cam Newton fumbled and this and that. And yeah, it's great that that's how he lost the game. But I think at some point when a team keeps winning, and if they beat a team that they're not supposed to beat or a team that's supposed to be a close game, then you start to, realize that you have to start taking them a little bit more seriously when it comes to setting lines.
I wanted to ask you if you've followed it at all. You mentioned Vegas, having the Bills as a 3-point favorite last week. They win by 3. The odds makers, it is. It's all mathematics. It's algorithms. It's actuarial science. There really isn't a lot. I think that people who do really get into the visceral aspect of gambling, a lot of the fun is taken out of it when you try to explain to them how much it's just math, really.
It's not even, and it's not the math like you used to see in the old days with people sitting in rooms with notebooks and pens and
right.
Creating numbers and now it's just computers. You rank a team, you adjust them based upon the game that they played, games that they should have lost but they won, and vice versa. And then the computer tells you what the spread should be. You see what everybody else puts up across all your other platforms, and then you put a little bit of feel into it. And you base the number or the juice upon the players that you have. If you have and you keep track of that. If you know that you have a really big player who's from Seattle, who's in town, then you shade the Seahawks a little bit more. And the same goes for Buffalo, and you can adjust your lines based upon the action that you assume you're going to take, and just kind of go from there. So if everywhere in town is Seahawks -3, and you're the Seahawks -3 -20 cents because you have a big bettor who's going to bet the Seahawks, and he lays that 20 cents, you got the best of it. And if you continue to take the best, whether you're a bookmaker or a bettor, if you continue to get the best number, you're going to end up on top. So you can lose a bad beat. But more often than not, if you're getting the best number out there, you're in a good place.
Well, let's apply that to what we've been seeing over the last 3 or 4 days, because with gambling and mobile gambling becoming ubiquitous, anybody can do it. Of course, people were betting on the presidential results, and they still can. Obviously, it hasn't been decided yet, not as of this recording. But the numbers seemed so pulled out of thin air, because you'd like to think that there's algorithms. Maybe they don't have the data in place or they're not plugged in. But for instance, Biden was favored to win, and I don't have it all the way back to the start, but when the polls began to close. But as of 10 o'clock Tuesday night, Trump was -370. He had become the favorite. 10 minutes later, he's -775. Now, the votes pretty much have been cast already. It's just a matter of counting them and having to break down the different jurisdictions and all that stuff. But it's amazing to me that within 12 hours, then Trump is +330, and then Biden's back down to -500. So I guess my question to you, as somebody in the business, that kind of business, where do they get these numbers? Because there seemed to be, unless you were just so emotionally tied to this, if you could be detached from the presidential race, you had a chance to make a lot of money off of these
for sure.
books that were throwing these wild numbers around based on what was being said on television.
Yeah. So every number that you put out there, the point spread or a money line, which would be like the presidential elections, is tied to a percentage, a win percentage. 70% equals minus $4, and go from there. And you base it upon bets that you base it upon where it's at, like count wise, where you think it's going to go, where states are polled to go, or where they've gone traditionally, what states can flip, what points, or rather electoral votes you get for those states, and you can deduce what the percentage chance of that person winning is, and then you just correlate it to a money line. Last I checked, I was looking on a British exchange page where it's decimal. Biden was like 1.1, which is like minus 990 now, if not more. And Kamala Harris is actually a smaller dog than Donald Trump is right now to be the next president. So you could actually bet Kamala Harris. It's crazy how much it fluctuates, and that's kind of like in running when you're betting in running sports. A team returns a kickoff for a touchdown, and all of a sudden they're a 6-point favorite when they were a 2-point dog. That's a huge swing of a play that normally wouldn't happen. How often do you see kickoff returns for touchdowns or pick sixes when you're about to score? So you have to factor a lot of those things in when you're creating lines, when you're betting lines. Is what
but the
happens.
Information on this, Joel, that I thought was so fascinating is all these things are happening at once. You don't watch the election sequentially. You're not watching a play and a
Right.
play and a play. You're watching anchors focused on Florida. Okay, so the first night of the race, they see Florida winning big. And so everybody's like, holy shit, there's no Trump's going to win it all. But they're not paying attention to yet. They haven't started focusing on Pennsylvania or Georgia or Wisconsin yet. And so everybody's so focused on the television coverage would really slant and really turn the betting upside down. If they just want to talk, if you're watching one channel, then then the money's just going to go shooting through because you can't possibly watch all 50 races at the same time.
Yeah, you're looking at
It's like betting
Nevada
on
and Arizona.
It's like betting on all 16 games on Sunday, all at once, all in running.
Right.
They're all factoring into.
Yeah, it's tough. It's really tough. You'd have to do that. You'd have to watch. If you were running election betting, you would have to have on Fox News, CNN, MSNBC, and then just having a independent, if you would call it that, like a website, just keeping tallies of the votes, whether it's Google or whomever you think is not one political party or the other.
Or some
and you'd have
data,
to just keep
some
track
data
of,
site. Yeah.
Yeah, and you'd have to just keep track of all of that and just fluctuate it based upon that. And you went to bet on Tuesday night thinking Trump's going to win this. There's no way Biden can get past like 246. And then you wake up the next morning after all the ballots came in for Biden. And then you think, wow, now he's like a $7 favorite. When you went to bed, he was a $1.50, $2 dog. And you're just like, what a big change, and that's just how it goes. That's why you won't see bets like that in a Las Vegas sports book, at least not anytime soon, because it's just so volatile.
Yeah. Well, maybe
According to what I read in the Buffalo News.
What's that, Jonah?
Well, according to what I read in the Buffalo News on Sunday, the ultimate bellwether is Cheektowaga. Whoever wins that region tends to win the presidency every 4 years.
And the capital of Cheektowaga, as we all know, is Sloan. So
right, that's that very district.
My parents, John and Sharon, are deciding votes to see who's going to become president.
Yeah, all those New York votes counted. Yeah.
New York it was possibly going to flip this year, I heard. But I thought of something the other day. I want to bring this up real quick. And I was texting my brother and sister during the game, like I always do, about how A.J. Klein played like complete and utter dog shit and couldn't tackle anything, was behind every play, was getting run over, couldn't cover anybody. And I actually texted, A.J. Klein must have naked pictures of Coach McDermott or something. How does that guy play in a game? He's just in the wrong place every time, everything like that. The play before Cam Newton fumbled, it was 3rd and 2, I want to say. Cam Newton hands off to whatever running back. A.J. Klein has him dead to rights in the backfield and just completely misses him on the tackle. Guy gets the first down on the sideline, first down. Next play or two, whatever, is when Cam Newton fumbles. If A.J. Klein makes that tackle, the very good chance that the Patriots kick the field goal to tie the game. And who knows what happens in overtime. So by A.J. Klein missing that tackle, it actually helped the Bills win, because if he makes that tackle, Cam Newton doesn't fumble on the next play. So his horrible playing and missed tackles helped the Bills win.
The butterfly effect. Matt and I looked it up after the game. It was, they had the Seahawks before that fumble had a 61% chance of winning the game based on down distance, how much time was left on the clock, all that stuff. So
AJ Klein just doing his part. That's all part of Sean McDermott's plan. Is like, get him in there.
What can I do to contribute to a win?
Miss the key tackles. Don't make all the tackles. Just make the right tackles and miss the right tackles.
Give him this first down.
Complimentary football.
Time off the clock.
Exactly. Great play. Great.
I'm going to put that in the column. If AJ Klein does anything on Sunday, I'm going to make that point, because I haven't seen that anywhere else. But you're right. AJ Klein won the Bills a game. He's earned his check.
Exactly.
He did more in that game than Tremaine Edmonds did.
Well, Tremaine Edmonds got injured. That was probably his best move of the game. You can tell he's not 100%. Edmonds. He's not even close to 100%. He's slow getting to plays. He's missing tackles. He's barely making tackles. He's definitely not at 100%, or else he's just gotten bad, one or the other.
So let's recap, because I think I may have forgotten one of your bets, but you'd say take the over. We're going to go over 55. What do you want? Buffalo in the points, or you're going to give
I'm taking the points. I'm taking the points with Buffalo +3. This goes back to kind of that feel that I had on Tennessee and on the Jets game. My heart told me to take the Bills, but the numbers told me to take the other side. At first, I thought, Seattle, they're just going to score at will on Buffalo's lackluster defense. But the numbers are telling me take the Bills +3.
Okay. Any bonus picks this week? Anything else on the board that you like?
I kind of like Minnesota -4. I kind of like Kansas City -10, but I haven't really hammered home anything that I really like yet. But those are the two that stood out to me.
If you want to get on the record with one of those, you just let me know.
Will do. I'll let you know.
All right.
I'll text you.
Joel Staniszewski on the line from Vegas. The pride of Sloan was unable to vote. Was unable to hold down.
I voted. I voted in New York and in Nevada. You could do that, right?
Yes, you can.
I voted here twice.
So that's 3 votes from Joel Staniszewski. Thanks, Joel.
Thanks, guys. Have a good one.